As a person that served over 4 years of time inside of county jails and prisons in New York State and the state of Kentucky, I've seen my share of fights and been in a few myself. But there was one individual that stood out above the rest, and he went by the nickname of Ace. And I'm about to tell you the story of how this dude was hands down the toughest and best fighter I've seen firsthand while serving time. Welcome back to another episode of Grow With Me, Sawyer P, where we grow together, not apart. Thank you all for tuning in, taking the time to listen. Got my first video posted last night. First one in a long time anyways, and I had a little extra free time before getting ready for bed. I got a little workout in earlier and did a few chores and errands and whatnot since it's the weekend, and I had a little time before bed here, so I wanted to see if I could get another video up, something interesting about when I was serving time. And as you can see, the video is about a man I had met that went by the nickname of Ace. And before I get into my story, let me just say the usual spiel. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. If you like this type of content, take the time to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. If you like things revolving around prison content, the prison genre, life after prison, motivational stories, addiction recovery, these are things that I touch on, and my channel is about. In particular, that's my niche, I guess you could say. Primarily addiction related stuff, the lifestyle, getting off of it, substances, serving time, life after prison, and stories of when doing time or inactive addiction, things of that nature. So I'm trying to get some interesting stuff that people might have some entertainment or shock value, or educate people that have never been in that life or have never been exposed to such things. They find this stuff entertaining and educational, and hopefully it'll motivate people to never do things that could get them in such situations, such as addicted to drugs or in prison or having to fight for their life, or in a prison or a jail, or to come off of a drug, which is very dangerous in itself, being addicted to substances. So yeah, if you appreciate this stuff, oh, and also if you like anyone that comments, I will take the time, especially in the first hours or days, the first few days after uploading a video, I will try very hard to respond to comments. I want to interact and engage with you all, and I appreciate the engagement because it tells the algorithm on YouTube to, when people are liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, it pushes the video out to more people. That's the way the algorithm works, is based off engagement with the video and how much time you watch it. The longer you watch the video, say it's a 20-minute video, if you watch the whole thing, it's more likely to get pushed to other people because people are actually watching the whole video and not being like, oh, this is lame after 1 minute of watching it, or 30 seconds, you know what I mean? So if people are watching the whole thing, it might have some value to it, or people might be interested in it. So with that being said, let's get into the story. So this story revolves around my time. This time frame was the very end of 2012. I actually had got arrested in the state of Kentucky. It's a town called Harland. Pretty, it's a country place, but it's pretty wild. It's a very impoverished, drug-infested place, and it's a coal mining area. That's the main industry there. It's predominantly white. There are other ethnicities there, of course, but not that race matters, but just to give you context of what the place is like. Um, that's the type of place it is. It's a coal mining country, and around this time, this was when Obama was in office. A lot of the coal mines were getting shut down. It was already a impoverished area that literally survived off of the coal mining industry, and it became even more impoverished because Obama was going, he was trying to pass some type of Clean Air Act, and a lot of the coal mines in that area got shut down. Real quick, I've lived in a few different states. I lived in New York, Kentucky, and Alabama throughout my life. So, I do have stories about New York and as well as Kentucky and, maybe some stuff down here. But primarily those two states, you're going to hear most of my content revolve around, the more interesting stories. So, anyways, around that time, a lot of the coal mines were getting shut down. It turned a place that was already bad to worse. People were getting desperate. A lot of people were trying to get on disability, people that were on welfare, trying to find ways to make money, be it scrapping metal or going into the mountains and sangin, as they call it, hunting for ginseng and things of that nature, so it was very impoverished. Theft was common, selling meth. Meth was really huge then. This is before fentanyl had made its way into every little nook and cranny. At that time, it was mostly like Roxy's, the Roxy 30s, and meth was like the big thing. There was other stuff too, but those were the two, between the opiates and the uppers, was the two main drugs of choices, and Suboxone, which, it's not really meant to be abused anyways. But anyways, so there was a lot of desperation in the area. Very common for people to get locked up. Everyone in that area had a family member that was an addict or an alcoholic. It was just the norm for people to go to jail there. It truly was. Men, women, you name it, it's pretty country area, So during that time, Christmas Day of 2012, I got in trouble for a whole slew of things. Possession of a firearm by a felon, which thank God the feds didn't pick up. They could have. Possession of stolen property. They tried to hit me with robbery first. A whole bunch of stuff. I got extremely fortunate. They didn't really have a lot of evidence on me, and I got a very good plea deal out of that. Primarily because the case they had was kind of weak, and I ended up doing about 4 months there, and then having to go back up to New York. They were supposed to extradite me, which they didn't show up in time, and I had to go up to New York and turn myself in for a parole violation because I was on interstate compact parole in the state of Kentucky. They transferred my parole from New York to Kentucky. When I turned myself in, I had to go do 18 months, but that's after all what I'm about to tell you all. So my time in Harland County Detention Center, oddly enough, that is a county jail. I've done time in state prison in New York, which is not to be underestimated. It can be very dangerous. Harland County that jail had the most aggressive, angry, fighting culture environment I have ever been in. And I think it was the way the jail was set up. It was dorms with 0 windows. The windows to see into the dorm, it was a big room with 3 tier-high bunks. 1, 2, 3. Usually it's 2. These ones had 3 levels. It was a room, I would say, I don't know, maybe 80 feet by 40 feet, and they crammed like 25 men in there or something like that. So it was an open dorm setting, 2 toilets, 2 showers, and a bunch of bunks, 1 television, no microwave, a cooler where we could put our soda we bought off commissary in ice, and that was it. There was no outdoor rec, no basketball courts. We could play cards. People gambled. When you're not getting sunlight, fresh air, you're crammed into a small room with a lot of men. It by nature automatically just makes you angry, stressed. We as men, when we get sad, depressed, frustrated, it comes out as anger. Even though it might be sadness, we express it usually in a hostile or aggressive way. That's just our male nature, the majority of us do anyways. It's pretty common, comes out as anger. Even, any negative emotion will. Because, us as men, we're not supposed to show weakness, right? So, anyways, my time in there, I myself had to fight many times, but, I wanted to paint the picture of what the environment was like first before talking about who I'm about to talk about. There's an individual by the name of Ace, and yes, you're going to see, as you have seen probably on the thumbnail when you clicked it, there's a picture of Kimbo Slice. This dude was like a smaller version of Kimbo Slice. He looked like him. He was built like him. He wasn't as big. He was like a more compact, smaller version. Black guy, beard, gold tooth, talk like this right here. What's up? What's up, partner? Just kind of just rough around the edges. You could tell he lived like a wild life. Probably grew up fighting. This dorm was predominantly white men. Every other place I've ever been to, it's primarily, like I said, I don't mean to bring race, or create division, but it's just, race is a big part of prison. It is, If you've watched prison content videos, you've probably learned that by now. That race does play into how your time will go and, how many of your ethnicity is in there can affect things and the politics and so forth. Well, this one was primarily white boys. Most of them were, had done meth in the street, and that stuff kind of makes you aggressive by nature. It just, even when you come off of it, I don't know what it does into the brain, but it makes people more aggressive and hostile and just lash out and just more erratic when you talk. People talk, say more wild, crazy, off the wall stuff, more loud vocally. But in there, at the time, I think a few black people would come in and out, and they usually wouldn't stay in there long because they were trying to keep them out. But Ace, he was the only black dude in there, and he stayed in there for quite some time for a reason, because he had good hands, and he liked to play poker. I got along with him fine. Like I said, this dude, he's going to remind you of a smaller, kind of more wild country, but a little hood too, version of Kimbo Slice, with smaller, had the muscles, the build, everything, pecs, biceps, delts, all that. He was built, and in there, people, they get bored, so they put a battery on each other's back and try to get people to box or slap box, or they just a way to let out aggression. Sometimes people would bet on one person or the other, or they would, I remember people taking sheets and tying them around their hands like boxing gloves, and then they box. Sometimes they lay the bed mats in the corner. There was a little blind spot. There's cameras in there. The COs were supposed to be watching to make sure people weren't fighting or hurting each other or doing anything crazy, but there are blind spots in jail, in prisons, and in this one particular corner, they would sometimes put mats and, get a few people together and they'd wrestle each other, and whoever came out on top was just, good for you, brownie points. People might respect you more, or if you're the one that gets whooped on, it might look bad and you might get picked on more. Losing a fight in there is usually not a good look, and well, it depends. People might, if you stand up for yourself, people respect it, but if you get whooped real bad, you know, people might kind of stay away from you for a while if you're all knotted up and you get whooped real bad, you know, it's just kind of a, you know, you got whooped, man, you know, just kind of like a shame thing or whatever, the way people look at the person that got whooped. But, so, you know, before seeing him, you know, fight, I remember, you know, one of those particular days they were trying to get people to wrestle and slap box, and I always tried to avoid. I just want to slide through, do my time. Like, I have had to fight before, but I try to avoid it, of course, where possible. I don't want to go to the hole. You could hurt somebody, you know, I could hurt someone, they could hurt me. There are all kinds of bad things can come from it, you know what I mean? But that's not to say I totally avoided it, because I absolutely have fought my share, and I had the most in that particular jail. I had in a 4-month period, I had 3 fights, you know, in a very short time, seen numerous fights, you know, while I was in there. So, you know, one particular day we were playing poker, and, you know, people talk smack on the table. If, you know, you beat somebody, you know, and you're raking in the money, you know, Ace, if he won a hand, he's like, give me the money, you know, he's raking it in. And I remember being like, fuck you, Ace, you know, sorry, I try not to cuss on this channel, but F you, Ace, you know. And I kind of meant it jokingly, but, like, you know, I was kind of smack talking him on the back. He's like, oh yeah? He's like, oh yeah? He's like, we can settle this right now. He's like, you want a box? And I'm like, oh man, you know, because this dude, at the time I'm 23, I just started working out. Dude was in way better shape, you know, I knew I was outgunned. He was kind of being playful about it, but, you know, it was going to be a boxing match, but body blows only body shots, no face. And I'm like, face or body? He's like, you want to do face? You know, he's like, you sure about that? I'm like, all right, we'll do body, you know. So, you know, we square up. Oh my God, this dude tore me up. You know, I hit him, but I mean, it was just, this dude, he was so, you know, dense and compact, you know, like I was hitting him in his stomach, his chest. Mind you, you know, for every few I get, he's lighting me up, like, you know, for every 2 I get, he's lighting me up 6-7 times, you know. And my whole body was just, you know, we both had our shirts off. I was covered in welts. My body was covered in welts and bruises, you know. By the time we were done, he tore me up. Oh, it hurt. You know, and I was for real trying. I was swinging on. I was trying to hit him hard. And mind you, like I said, I was young. You know, this was how many years ago? 12 years ago. So, you know, I was 20, like 23, 24. You know. And at that point, I just started working out, so I wasn't really taking things serious yet, and, you know, hadn't really learned how to fight yet. But, you know, I gave it my all, and, you know, we walked away, shook each other's hand, and you know, I always had a good relationship with the dude. But, you know, he was always on that poker table every single day, and a lot of the time he was winning too. And like I said, this is a white dorm. He is the only black guy. Most of the other blacks have gotten run out. You know, and a lot of other facilities I've been in, it's the other way around. Like, usually the blacks have the numbers, or maybe Hispanics sometimes Hispanics, but it's usually more so black for most places I've been. And, you know, sometimes, a lot of times the whites would get run out or would get pushed up on, or, you know, the white people would have more issues because they were the minority. But this was the one time the dynamic was different. So, you know, day in, day out, way to pass time was the poker table. And there was this other dude in there. We'll just call him Chris. I think that was his name. I'm pretty sure his name was Chris. But anyways, you know, he was a white dude. He was shorter. He was probably like 5'7", but he was decently built. I believe he had at one point worked in the coal mines, so he had worked a labor job. He was a fairly strong fella, you know. Wasn't washed up completely, although he did do drugs in the street. When he came in there, he started eating, he started putting some weight on, getting healthy, and was built decent. So a lot of people, you know, Ace, he would win a lot. Sometimes he would lose, but a lot of the time he was walking away at the end of the night with a big old bag of commissary, and people thought, you know, I think some people suspected him of cheating. And I remember one particular day, you know, that day I wasn't playing cards. I was just, people just walk around the dorm, you know, just walk a circle around that 80 by 50 room, roughly however big it was. And, you know, you can't go anywhere else, and you got energy and there's nothing to do, so you just walk around so you don't lose your mind. You might walk with someone and talk, you know. And Chris, he was walking and talking with this other skinhead type dude. You know, he had like the swastikas blasted above his ear tattoo, or the lightning bolt joints. Not, he did have swastikas on him as well. You know, was definitely kind of into the whole white supremacist thing, and you could see them whispering. It seemed kind of, I didn't think much of it in the moment when we were walking. You know, they were walking in their own, you know, in their own too, kind of slowly. Poker tables in the middle. There's bunks on each side of the wall. In the middle of the room, there's, you know, maybe 3 tables where we would eat, you know, our chow, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, where people would play cards or sit there and write letters, draw, whatever. And, you know, they're sitting there playing cards, walking, and Chris, the whole time, he's scheming. I didn't know this till after the fact. You know, planning something, and I think he got beat on a bad hand by Ace, and Ace kind of was running his mouth to him at the table. You know, they kind of yapped back and forth at each other at the table. Chris felt disrespected, and, you know, I'm walking behind them. The skinhead dude and Chris are together in front of me, and I just see Chris come up and boom, sucker punched. I mean, he hit him hard, like. You know, if you could tell he's had a chin, man, because that probably the way he caught, you know, the dude was totally off guard. He wasn't. He was sitting there playing, you know, in the middle of a hand playing, and dude snuck him and hit him. I mean, he wound up and boom, like it was not a weak little tap. You know, he sucker punched him and, you know, caught him, you know, with a very, you know, he put a lot of power into it. You know, it was loud. And it about knocked Ace off the bench, but he hopped right up. He was ready to go. Hopped right up, pulled his pants up, started, you know, doing this, and just bop, bop, bop. He started going in on the kid. And the kid, you know, at first he was fighting, you know, trying to put up a fight. Seemed like he was doing okay at first, but Ace just tore him up, destroyed, split him open, bruised him. Mind you, the cops never came. They never came when we were, you know, whenever I had the body blows fight with him. They never showed up. But they were having a real fight, and it was not in a blind spot. Cops never showed up. They could definitely see it. It was definitely in plain view. Fight lasted probably about a minute. You know, fights, you know, street fights and, like, you know, non-MMA fights that are commissioned or whatever, you know, they usually last less than a minute a lot of time before people either gas out, someone says I'm done, or it gets broken up or something. You know, usually, you know, it takes a lot of wind to fight. Usually the person with the most wind, if they don't get knocked out or hurt quickly, the person with the most wind capacity, like the best cardio, is the person that wins from my experience. The guy with the cardio, if it goes the stretch, it's the guy with the cardio that usually wins the fight. So, cardio wasn't necessary. Ace, man, his knuckles, I remember how they felt whenever he hit me in the ribs and stomach. He tore the kid up, just busted him up. His whole face was black and blue. And, you know, eventually he was like, all right, you got it. You know, like I said, Chris sucker punched him. He should have knocked him out. The way he hit him, I'm very shocked it didn't knock Ace out, but you know, Ace walked away. Yeah, motherfucker, you gonna sneak me? Yeah, what's up? You know, and you know, with that big gold tooth, and, you know, kind of talk like a hood pirate, you know, hood version of a pirate, but, you know, he had admirable and likable quality. There was things about him that were likable. He was a funny dude, you know, and he could back up what he said, you know. So time goes on. seen numerous other fights between other individuals. That was the most fightingest dorm. I had a few situations myself. There's one of my older videos about that where where two dudes two tried to jump me, but it seemed like others were interested in getting involved just because I was from New York. They don't, not only were they racist there, but they don't like outsiders, That's where a lot of my issues came up from, is where I didn't grow up in that area. Because usually I get on decent with people, but, people look for any reason to cause division or fight. So time goes on. That fight between Chris and Ace created some tension. There was a kid in there named Paul, I won't say his last name, and another guy that went by Boots. Paul, he wasn't a particularly good fighter, but he would, and he was wild, and he didn't care. He had done a lot of meth in the street. He was getting ready to go up to state prison to do 7 years for a robbery at knife point he had done on somebody. And he just seemed to have that F-it type of attitude. He didn't typically play cards. Paul didn't. He didn't usually, gamble. But Boots, another individual by the name of Boots, this was a big, this guy was probably all of 6'6", 6'7", probably weighed about, he had to weigh close to 300. He was a large dude, He wasn't ripped and cut up, but he was just big boned, big hands, big bodied. Just looked like he could, if he got a hold of you, you're in trouble. Or if he connects good with a good punch, he's just big, heavy-handed dude, white dude. That incident between Chris and Boots had created some friction. I think it started to become even more, it wasn't even as much about cards. Even though they thought he was cheating, it became a more racial thing, and they just wanted no black people in the dorm, period. Which is, it's unfortunate that race becomes an issue, but it's just how it is in there, A lot of people stick together based on their ethnicity, It is what it is. I don't make the rules, it's just how it is, So some time passes, it felt like forever, because a day in there feels like, a month. Time goes so slow in there. Even a few hours feels like forever, Time just drags because there's nothing to do hardly. It's hard to find ways to pass the time. And day in, day out, still playing poker, people still spinning, walking. When I say spinning, I mean walking laps around the room. People still doing their drawing, writing letters, still doing the wrestling in the corner, still seeing your fights over stupid stuff. And one day, Ace won another big pot. The card game had ended. I think it was getting ready to be, I think the way this happened, if I remember correctly, it was dinner time, so we had to clear the table off so everyone, they could bring the trays in, everyone ate. And after everyone had ate, we piled the trays up by the door to the dorm. And, sometimes people after that, a lot of times people would lay down for, you're just kind of stuffed and tired from all that eating and just want to lay down for a little bit. And, after everyone had ate, Ace was sitting on his bunk counting all his stuff he had won. He had soups, ramen noodle soup, summer sausage, Slim Jims, bags of chips, coffee, little packs of Maxwell House coffee is what they had in there, candy bars, sodas. Probably had all of at least $40 worth of commissary, which that's, it's pretty hard to win like that consistently. So, there was suspicion that he was cheating, like I said previously, and that was, and the race factor it was just getting things up to a pretty pivotal point. The friction. Sorry, I thought I turned my mic off. Ooh, I think I might have muted it. So yeah, it was creating a lot of friction. Sitting on his bunk, he's counting his commissary and all that stuff. Probably excited because he's got a big pile of it. And Paul comes up. So Paul, remember the wild one I told you about? I see him kind of creep. Boots is sitting on his rack. He's got his back turned this way in a pile of stuff sitting next to him. And Boots starts walking up, and they just start going back and forth, man. He's like, we think you're fucking cheating, da 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 da. They start calling him out on it. And he's like, man, I didn't fucking cheat. And he stood up, and Boots is in front of him. And Paul's behind, and they're on both sides, Paul's on the side of the rack, but Boots is right in front of him and has him trapped in between two bunks. So there's two bunks in a wall. Ace is trapped between the wall and Boots. He can't come out between those bunks. Paul's on the other side of the bunk, kind of sticking his head under, talking to him. So he's kind of like trapped. They kind of got him cornered in a spot. And, Ace stands up, This is the first time I've seen him look a little nervous because it's understandable. This man, Boots, was a very large dude. You don't usually want to fight with someone a lot, that's probably got 100 pounds or more on you. But Boots is like, motherfucker, give the shit back to everyone that you won from. And Boots like, I ain't giving back shit. Fuck that, and Boots just boom, and just starts bah, 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 starts laying into Boots. Or Boots starts laying into Ace. And Ace, he's trying to fight, man. Paul's reaching, Paul, the wild, crazy, methed out, this dude is nutty. He's reaching under the rack and boom, punching him in the side of the face from the side. I remember one point seeing Boots hit Ace in the face, knocked him, like, he about knocked him out. You could tell he was about to lose consciousness, then he hit him again and it woke him up. It was the craziest thing I ever seen. When it, like, brought him back to, he started just da-da-da-da-da. Like, Ace, in reality, they were kind of getting the better of him, but it wasn't fair. But Ace, man, you had nothing but, you had to respect it, man. He was giving it his all, and he did quite well, considering, he was trapped in a spot, getting hit in the side by one person that's reaching under the rack, reaching through and hitting him in the side of the face, and then you got a big man that weighs 100 pounds. Ace probably weighed, I would guess, 175, but he was a dense, lean, strong 175. He was not washed up, muscular, in very great shape, cut up. And this time the COs did come in. I don't know. It just maybe because they seen he was getting jumped, they were worried. They can get sued if someone gets truly hurt. They come rushing in, and Paul goes off one way, Boots goes off the other way. And Ace is still standing, he's still standing, and there's just an argument going on. And mind you, during all this, right before, like, at some point, Paul had grabbed the bag. He got all the stuff off Ace's bed, put it in the bag, or maybe Ace had put it all in the bag before the fight had started. He sensed something was going that direction. He put it in a net bag, like a laundry net bag. And it was sitting on the bed, and Paul grabbed all of it, threw it under his bunk. And, people told what was going on. He stole from him, and da-da-da-da-da. And Ace was like, where's my shit at? Where's my stuff at? Like, he didn't tell, but, the guards ended up finding it, under Paul's bunk. About $40 worth of stuff. They all went to the hole. Paul came back to that dorm about a week later. Or no. Who went to the hole? Boots went to the hole. No. They just took Ace out. I don't even think they took Boots and Paul out. No, they took Paul out. They took Paul out for about a week. He went to the hole, but he came back. And I ended up fighting Paul myself. I fought him and a kid named Kevin Burkhart back to back. That was crazy. That's in a previous story of mine. Where crazy white boys try to jump me. That's the name of the video. But it's one of my previous ones, one of my early ones. And, when I had that fight, they kept, after that incident, they kept Ace in the hole the whole time. The hole, there's literally nothing in there but a sink and a toilet and a room. You get a mat, and you got a blanket, you got a mat and a blanket, and it was a concrete floor, nothing else. You didn't get if you were in there for more than a week, they give you a Bible. If you got mail, you got the chance to read it, then you're supposed to give it back. It was awful, you're sitting in a room with a toilet, and that's it, and a sink. But I remember talking to him in the hole, and he was like, man, that was some bullshit, man. You see how they snuck me? You see how they snuck me? But, I had nothing but respect for Ace. He always stood up for himself. When I did see him fight, he tore dudes up to the point where I don't know if they felt maybe he was a danger or a threat to others or why. I'm not sure why they kept him in the hole. Like I said, I was only in there 4 months. But he was in a cell next to me, and I was able to talk to him through the feed flap where they give you the feed up trays. And we talked about the incident, and he was like, oh, what's up, New York? How you doing? That's what they call him, New York. And he's like, man, that was some bullshit, how all that happened. And we talked about it, but I liked him because he stood up for himself. You could tell the dude, if he had to, he would have fought the whole dorm, you know what I mean? Win or lose. And, odds stacked against him, I think he's got pretty good odds because, his level of fitness, he had a background of fighting. You could just tell, by the way he used his hands, and just was a good fighter, And mind you, I never mentioned this. This dude was in there, if I remember correctly, I think he had like a trespassing charge, and his bond was like $300. I felt bad for him, He couldn't get the $300. He could have got out for $300, and he was sitting there for months. I don't know how long he ended up staying in there, but he was in there for months and months. Over a trespassing charge, he could have bonded out for $300 if he could have got $300 together. So that's the story of Ace. Wild dude. I hope he got out. I hope he's living a better life if he's still alive. Like I said, this was 12 years ago. This dude was probably in his late 40s when I had met him. I would guess around maybe 46, 47, 48. But Ace, you have my respect. And keep fighting if you're still out there. Keep fighting if you're still out there around Harland, Kentucky. And maybe not necessarily physically fighting, but keep fighting. Fight the good fight. And try to be a good man. Stay out of jail. Especially for stupid trespassing charges. Or it's either trespassing or an order of protection. But either way, stay out. Stay out. Especially over petty stuff like that. Things you could lose your, you can die from a fight. It does happen. People would fall, hit their head, you get hit the right way in the temple, can cause brain injury. I mean, it's rare, but it does happen, So, moral of the story, I guess you could say it's good to stand up for yourself. It's good to admire people that are willing to defend themselves when it comes down to brass tacks and in a situation where your back's literally against the wall. Like it was for him. But, moral of the story is stand up for yourself. Don't gamble. The poker table, don't gamble out here in the free world. Stay out of jail, but if you do have to go, there's the 3 G's they always say: gays, gambling, and gangs. Stay away from those. there's more things to avoid trouble when you're doing time, but those are 3 big major things to stay out of major trouble. Avoid those 3 things: gambling, gays, like such as homosexuality in the prison, and gangs, like joining a gang, getting affiliated, all that stuff. If you can avoid that stuff, try to. That's what I was always taught. So, Ace, you have my respect. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. This one was kind of a longer one. I'm going to keep pumping them out. So, I love y'all. Thanks for tuning in of another episode of Grow With Me, Sawyer P, where we grow together, not apart. Love y'all. If you want, share, like, subscribe. Any of that stuff helps. Comment. I will respond if it's in the first few days after me posting, and maybe even longer, but definitely in the first few days. So, y'all have a good night. Love y'all.